Still in chapter 23, but this is the last video, and this one is going to be on processing nutrients. So only monosaccharides can be absorbed. Starch and disaccharides cannot. They have to be broken down into oligosaccharides and disaccharides. And carbohydrate digestion is going to begin in the mouth with salivary amylase. These oligosaccharides and disaccharides are going to be further broken down into lactose, maltose, and sucrose, and the final breakdown into monosaccharides. And this is going to be glucose, galactose. So we have, trying to find a cursor. Here we go. Starch and disaccharides breakdown begins in the mouth with salivary amylase. Pancreatic amylase comes in. We have the oligosaccharides and disaccharides breaking down into lactose, maltose, sucrose, and then you can see they break down even further into the monosaccharides. So now we'll talk about the digestion of proteins. The source of protein is not only dietary, but also includes digestive enzymes and proteins from the breakdown of mucosal cells. So first, proteins are going to be broken down into large polypeptides, then small polypeptides and small peptides, and then finally into amino acid monomers with some dipeptides and tripeptides. Digestion of protein begins in the stomach when pepsinogen is converted to pepsin at that low pH of 1.5 to 2.5. Cursor. So we have proteins. Again, digestion begins in the stomach when pepsin becomes activated. And this is going to break it down into large polypeptides, then into small polypeptides and small peptides, and finally into amino acids. Digestion of lipids. So steps in lipid digestion in the intestine include, or begin with, I should say, emulsification. So triglycerides and their breakdown products are insoluble in water. That is the whole lipids do not dissolve in water thing. So they actually need a pre-treatment with bile salts that are going to help break down large fat globules into smaller ones. The next step is digestion. Pancreatic lipases break down the fat into a monoglyceride plus 2 free fatty acids. And then we have micelle formation, and this is products from digestion become coated with bile salts and lecithin. And I know that doesn't look like that's pronounced lecithin, but I looked it up. Then we have diffusion. Lipid products leave the micelles and cross epithelial membrane via diffusion. Next, we have chylomicron formation. So the lipid products are going to be converted back to triglycerides and packaged with lecithin and lipoproteins, forming a chylomicron. The chylomicrons are exocytosed from the basolateral cell, and then they enter the lymphatic lacteal. Once in the blood, the chylomicrons are broken into free fatty acids and glycerol by lipoprotein lipase, so they can be used by cells. And short-chain fatty acids can diffuse directly into blood. So we have emulsified triglycerides. Starts off in the mouth, sort of. Minor importance, lingual lipase. Then we have gastric lipase, also plays a minor importance. And then when we get to the small intestine, this is where emulsification is going to occur by bile, the action of bile. And then we end up all the way down. I lost my cursor. Here we are. So we start off with unemulsified triglycerides. We end up with monoglycerides and fatty acids. And again, these are the steps. Emulsification is the first step. So those large fat globules are going to get broken up into smaller ones. We see a big globule. Now we have these smaller ones. Digestion, pancreatic lipase is going to hydrolyze the triglycerides, giving us monoglycerides and free fatty acids. We have micelle formation, and then we have diffusion, So the fatty acids and monoglycerides diffuse from the micelles into the epithelial cells. Then we have chylomicron formation. The fatty acids and monoglycerides are recombined and packaged with other fatty substances and proteins to form chylomicrons. And then the chylomicrons are going to be exocytosed and they're going to enter the lacteals. Finally, we have digestion of nucleic acids. So the nuclei of ingested cells in the food that we eat do contain DNA and RNA. And there are pancreatic nucleases that hydrolyze nucleic acid into the nucleotide monomers. And if you remember back from AMP1, nucleotide monomers are going to be made of free nitrogenous bases, pentose sugars, and phosphate ions. So we have brush border enzymes, nucleosidases, and phosphatases that are going to break those nucleotides down into those components: free nitrogenous bases, pentose sugars, and phosphate ions. The breakdown products are actively transported by special carriers in the epithelium of villi. And so that's what we have here. Cursor, there we go. Nucleic acids are broken down into pentose sugars, nitrogenous bases, and phosphate ions. Then we have the vitamin absorption, or I should say vitamin absorption, not the vitamin absorption. So we have vitamin absorption in the small intestine and in the large intestine. In the small intestine, fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, K are carried by micelles. They diffuse into absorptive cells. Water-soluble vitamins B and C are absorbed by diffusion or by passive or active transporter. Vitamin B12 binds with intrinsic factor and is absorbed by endocytosis. And then finally, in the large intestines, vitamin K and B and B vitamins from bacterial metabolism are absorbed. I'm not going to ask you to memorize all these electrolytes and where they're absorbed, but I did want you to know that absorption of electrolytes does occur, and most of the ions are transported actively along the small intestine. We have iron and calcium absorbed in the duodenum. We also have sodium being absorbed, and chloride is transported actively, and then potassium diffuses in response to osmotic gradients. So it's actually lost if water absorption is poor. And I guess I should mention, sodium is absorbed, but it's coupled with the active absorption of glucose and amino acids. And then we have the absorption of water. So 9 liters of water, most from GI secretions, are going to enter the small intestine. The majority of it, about 95%, is absorbed in the small intestine by osmosis, but the rest is absorbed in the large intestine. Here's your question. That is all I have for this talk. That's all I have for chapter 23. You guys have a good day.